Star Wars month! It's Star Wars month! It's Star Wars month! Star Wars month! I love Star Wars! I love Star Wars. I feel like reiterating that every year is unnecessary, but hey, here we are. And I've written that down into the script too, so yeah, there's no editing that. Yeah, there's no editing that.
Okay, and then I say, what? Come on, you lazy bugger, just delete the sentence and write something else. Of course you can edit it, you minge. Is this how you think I speak? Whoa.
Like I said, my hands are tied. Not that all Star Wars games are great, there's a lot that are pure garbage, and while like a raccoon I do enjoy diving into some garbage every so often, let's steer clear of that stank for today at least, and hit the first of 2 sequels for this year, Star Wars Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight, the continued story of Diet Han Solo, Kyle Katarn. And where do we even find Katarn at the beginning of this new adventure? Well, where else? A cantina on Nar Shaddaa.
I'm not interested in leaving. I have some business to conclude with your friend, 88.
Kinda rude, Katarn. Dude was just standing behind you and gently pressing his pistol into your head, you know, doing his job, and you go and flip him head first onto the seat next to you. Have you ever had a nasty head rush when you're upside down for too long? Probably gonna be dizzy and have a headache after that, man. That's just kind of mean. I remember like it was yesterday talking about Dark Forces 1 last year and saying that game felt and played like a fan fiction writer got the green light to make his own version of Han Solo and got to make a game out of it while it still remained canonical in Star Wars lore, at least at that point in time, because, you know, that was prior to it all becoming legends when, you know, the great Disney takeover happened. So if Dark Forces 1 was like fanfic given the green light, then Dark Forces 2 comes across like Dark Forces 1 was merely just the first draft of an epic fanfic saga. All right, gentlemen. So, Dark Forces did way better than we were expecting it to. In fact, it sold enough to get us a sequel. So, floor is open. If you've got ideas for a sequel, I want to hear them. Throw them at me.
Yeah, I've got an idea. You know, I always kind of wondered what Han Solo would be like if he was also a Jedi.
Genius. Have it on my desk by Monday. Yeah, it's all about Kyle Katarn being even better than he was in the past. Come to find out, Kyle Katarn here is actually Force sensitive. Who would have thunk it? And some big bad Force users are after something Kyle has, and it's up to him to figure out what it is that they want and why the remnants of the Empire want it. And so, a new adventure with Kyle Katarn begins, and so does murdering countless aliens. The story's light and not really anything to cover too extensively, especially if you want a little bit of a schlocky Star Wars story to go and enjoy on yourself. I won't spoil it. It's still fun if you understand that it is absolutely a fan fiction made real.
Time for a little swim.
But as far as gameplay is concerned, if you're a fan of Dark Forces 1, then there's really not too much to say about the gameplay of Dark Forces 2. At least initially, anyway. It's more of Dark Forces' frantic first-person Doom-like combat, but with the graphics heavily dialed up. If Dark Forces was the Star Wars equivalent of Doom, then Dark Forces 2 is the Quake equivalent. Enemies and yourself are now fully 3D models. Ah yes, and next up we have a Gran. By God, Jim, what's this? I think we have a 3D model here. Yes, that's exactly what we have. Look at that. An X and Y axis as expected, but by the Force he has a Z axis as well. I've never seen such a thing. While it looks much more impressive than the original Dark Forces for the time period, something about being able to look back with modern eyes, knowing where things are now, makes me much more fond of the 2D sprite style of the original. It certainly held better over time in my opinion, but Dark Forces 2 was still a hell of an improvement over the original, especially for 1997. There's a good amount of detail in the models and the levels themselves, enough to bring everything to life, and combined with the stellar soundtrack of John Williams and sound effects straight out of the films, before long, you've kind of forgotten that you're playing a somewhat ugly game and you've lost yourself in yet another Star Wars fantasy again. God dang it, Mathas. Control yourself. But the graphics aren't the only thing they got an upgrade. No. The cutscenes got a nice visual upgrade too, to real people actually, and some CGI characters. This is when Kyle Katarn would start looking like, well, I guess Kyle Katarn, the one we all grew to love and know over the series as it continues. Unlike, Dark Forces 1, where he's kind of just this beefy, generic comic book character who looks nothing like Kyle Katarn and kind of is the model we would all forget. And the CG characters are acceptable for the time. Not great, but the lower resolution of the footage helps the actors kind of blend in with the computer graphics sets and the computer graphics characters a lot easier. Also, with real actors comes, well, real acting. And it's almost good, which I promise is actually a compliment. And the actor who plays Katarn himself is acceptable. Not amazing, but believable enough in a fan film sort of way. Keep in mind, they use real actors during this particular time set too, because this was a time where people believed graphics would eventually go into full motion video completely, where you would be controlling an actor motion capped on a screen. That's legitimately what people thought we were going to be doing 10 years from the time this game came out. Thank God that didn't happen. So, Dark Forces looks like Star Wars, sounds like Star Wars, but does it play like, well, I guess a good video game? If you play Dark Forces 1, then there's not much changed right out the gate. You have full control over your vision now via the mouse though, which is super nice compared to being able to only look straight ahead from the first game in all keyboard controls. But you still can't really aim per se. There's no iron sights, no targeting reticule. You kind of do what you did in the first one, you just point your blaster in the general direction of bad alien guy and pull the trigger. The closer you are, the more likely you are to hit the enemy with your blaster shots. But the big change in the camera is actually for the level design. Every level is much more vertical in the sequel, with tall buildings, winding hallways filled with things to shoot and secrets to discover. The levels are still maze-like as all games were from this era, but instead of getting lost on a pretty horizontal level, now it's vertical, and you'll find yourself looping around multiple times as you backtrack for keys you might have missed, or a door that was tucked away somewhere near impossible to find. Enemies are also tucked in every corner of the game, hidden behind boxes and pillars, so then you get a few cheap shots in as you pass by before you realize they're there and you're now flanked on both sides. Were you just waiting there for me? Didn't you hear your friends screaming? In pain? Dying? And the way they hit enemies around the levels certainly proved to bring a few cheap deaths my way, but just taught me to save often and annihilate them the next time around. Normally I'd call it bad design, because it kind of is, but I feel like at this time in game dev, modern sensibilities weren't really a thing yet. They were still being developed, and this was a way to bring challenge to the player, at least in their minds. It got under my skin a little bit, but generally I didn't lose too much progress when dying, and hopping back into the game with new knowledge was pretty quick and easy. But that'll only really last an hour or two anyway, because after the third stage in the game, it fundamentally changes and takes its first steps into the kind of gameplay the franchise is known for from here on out. Because in the third stage, you get yourself a lightsaber. Dark Forces 2 goes from typical first-person shooter from the late 90s to first or third-person action-adventure game in the span of mere seconds. He's also, immediately good with a lightsaber too. Look at him. He's never held a lightsaber in his life before, and now he's just blocking blaster shots like he's halfway through his Jedi training. And it's from here you'll be running through more big levels. And if you're a boring person, you can keep using your blaster still. No one's gonna judge you except for me. But if you're a cool dude, well, if you're a cool dude, you just use your lightsaber. And over time, your newly unlocked force powers, like healing and force pull, which yanks guns out of enemies' hands. It's at this point that the game also begins to start heaping enemies onto you because, quite frankly, the lightsaber combat makes the game significantly easier. It's a blast to run up to stormtroopers and bounty hunters, waggling your lightsaber around like a new toy and watching them fall, even some of them having their arms fly off. Even the boss fights in the game become super simple as you just sidestep around them while whacking them with your lightsaber until they all fall over. Sure, it's a primitive combat system, but it's got the basis for the combat systems in the following games that would precede it, Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. And it's still good fun here to mess around with. It just goes to show that limb removal with a lightsaber is just as fun, no matter the polygon count. You get more of what you like if you liked it the first time, and if you didn't, the lightsaber combat might be what turns you around. And at this point, I know what's next. Jedi Outcast, one of my favorite games in this genre of all time. And I'm so excited to tackle that next time. But for this Star Wars month, unfortunately the next game ain't so good. I think the most important aspect of Jedi Knight is the fact that it really leads into Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. It's the official first step into those games and away from the 90s first-person shooters that it's clearly influenced by. And it's a good thing, because man, Outcast and Academy are some of my favorite Star Wars games ever made. Probably right up there with KOTOR, though KOTOR 1 and 2 hold the top spot, I think for obvious reasons. But Dark Forces with lightsaber combat's not a bad sell, and it does it very, very well. It's super fun, if a little easy, and is incredibly enjoyable and is fully a Star Wars experience. There is not a moment when I wasn't playing that game where I felt like I was living through some Star Wars side story. The moment I took my pistol out in the cantina in the first level, I was in, and I knew what I was getting into. This is one of my favorite games growing up. I played a little Dark Forces 1 and enjoyed it when I was a kid, but it was Dark Forces 2 that enraptured me and made me excited to play more Star Wars games. This was like the first Star Wars game that clicked with me when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old or so. And this is one of the first games that actually gave me a choice. This actually has kind of a choice system built in that leads you down dark side or light side force powers, which is kind of cool. It's primitive and it is not nearly as intricate as some of the later games that we would see in the Star Wars franchise, but it's there, and that alone is cool because Star Wars is always about that struggle between the light and the dark side. And to have it represented in a video game where your choices determine which path you take, that's kind of neat. So that's why I, the Honorable Judge Mathas, judge this game as innocent. It's Dark Forces, more Dark Forces, but with lightsaber. Good lightsaber combat for 1997. Dismemberment, it's pretty. 3D models, There's a lot really done well here in Dark Forces 2, and if you loved Dark Forces 1, then you already know that you love Dark Forces 2. But if you haven't checked out the games, pick up Dark Forces 2. I think you'll probably like that one a little bit better because of the lightsaber combat and, 3D models for a lot of people. I personally prefer the 2D sprites of the first one, but it's not to say that Dark Forces 2 looks bad. It looks old, but there's an art style there, and it holds up pretty well today. So my question to you is, well, the same one as last year. Favorite Star Wars game? It has to happen every year. What is your favorite Star Wars game ever made? It's just a simple question. There are tons of them, and there are more on their way out every year or every other year, whether you want them or not. Corporations. Yay. Star Wars month is officially underway, and we'll have the next episode by the end of this week or the beginning of next. It should be pretty quick, and it'll be the other sequel I have not been excited to talk about, but has to be done. I've got a lot of Star Wars games to work through, and I want to hit the ones that are going to be the worst early on in this Judge Mathas career. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you drop that subscribe button thing and hit that like button and ring the bell and drop a comment and do all the things that pleases the YouTube algorithm. And a big thank you, as always, to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/JudgeMathas. There's a link below if you want to go above and beyond to support me, get some prizes, an exclusive podcast to those who are our Patreon members. There's a lot of stuff. You can go check it out below. And like I said, it kind of just directly supports me instead of having to worry about YouTube ads, which are worth a lot less than when I used to do this in the beginning, which is funny because even when I started this, the ads were not great, but YouTube, yay. I'll be back very soon with the next and final episode of Star Wars Month here on Judge Mathas, and then the next review starting in January, not February. We're not in February yet. January. It's Killer 7. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you guys so much. I love you. Bye-bye.